Hey, it's Soul, looking really good with another video on game design in the World of Warcraft. Shadowlands is going to be released in a few short weeks and we'll soon enjoy a vacation in the Warcraft afterlife, with places to explore, things to kill, and another system to strap onto our backs for a few years before we shrug it off in favor of whatever comes next. And that's going to be the focus of today's topic, those temporary systems, expansion features, borrowed powers, etc, that for better or worse we've had for the past few expansions now. Incredible power we took into our hands, followed by a not so graceful disconnection or depowering. Fans are mixed as to whether this is the best direction for WoW to go down, where an expansion feels like a self-contained experience that you've got to be there for before it's gone. Fans questioned if the efforts of the WoW developers are wasted because these cool things only last for so long. At the moment, with Covenant choice in Shadowlands, I'm left to question, even at this very early stage, what's the value of meaningful choice, as Ian has hammered into our heads so many times, when Covenants are likely going to be restricted to the Shadowlands zones. Over the years, I've made numerous suggestions to replace the philosophy of expansion features with evergreen systems that are made to last, and fortunately, for some of you, I am not going to be talking about player housing. But keep that in mind. This time I'm going to present to you something familiar and obvious, and what's been right in front of us, and what has, at least in my opinion, been neglected. It's the evergreen system. We're talking about professions. What if the foundation of an expansion feature wasn't on some invented system like the Garrison, or artifact weapons, or the Heart of Azeroth, or the whatever, but an already existing set of systems, like professions? Now, as usual, with these kinds of presentations, it's easy to get you, the viewer, to be on board with the basic premise of what I'm trying to sell here, that something WoW is doing sucks, and put a focus on professions as the thing that players can work for in a given expansion, and we'll get to the bullet points that I'm trying to hit. When it comes to these specific examples though, you and I are going to be less united on that front, because so many of us have different ideas, sometimes better than mine. And hopefully this will at least get the gears going in your brains as to what's possible. And I challenge you that before you leave that really easy comment about how this and this won't work, consider what you think can make it work. Because that's the fun in these design videos, to turn a blocker into an obstacle to overcome, and hopefully, overcome it. So let's get started. What will a refocus on professions do for us, the players, and them, the developers? For players, professions are accessible. We already have them. All it takes to get in is to talk to your profession trainer and we'll get right to it. It's optional. Professions have never been exactly required to complete raids and dungeons and PvP, and that's not going to change here, but there is some cool stuff that you can make. It's familiar. There won't be some huge grind to power up your professions. It's going to have all the familiar beats, from skill ups to daily quests to maybe a progression quest line that will add a little bit of flavor and story to your profession. It's going to offer short and long-term rewards. Some things will be easy to make, some will be pretty much out of your reach without some very hard to find materials. Transmog stuff, toys and mounts, and more that you would typically see baked into other expansion features are all going to be spread throughout all of WoW's professions. It can deliver on player identity and choice. Ooh, that's something we haven't heard of before. Class and profession combos have been a thing for a while, but now we can take a fresh look at professions and see how they can deliver on something unique and fun and maybe profitable too. And very importantly, it will last as an evergreen system. You can always go back and work on these professions anytime. From the development standpoint, as a non-designer, I'm pretty much talking out of my ass here, if I'm being honest, but I'd like to think that this next set of bullet points is gonna make sense. Putting work towards making professions into a long-tail system, I think it seems efficient from a production standpoint. There's no more having to build something from the ground up. Designers simply need to take the philosophies of, the grinding and the pacing and such, and apply it to professions to make it not feel like a one and done, where's my content blizz sort of thing. By consequence, it gives attention back to professions. It had its moments, but these days professions have felt very utilitarian in how they're implemented. They're pretty bare minimum with a focus on profitability over potency. Professions are also a hybrid evergreen system. They naturally lose some relevance because, we're going to move on from patch to patch, expansion to expansion and such, but people still go back and craft their sky golems and fellsteel longblades and glyphs. It's a feature that keeps giving long after the expansion is over, and that I think is incredibly valuable for an MMO to have. As mentioned earlier, it delivers on player identity and choice. I find it slightly baffling that Blizzard's trying to deliver on this with the Shadowlands when we've been sitting on this for soon to be 16 years. Giving professions more oomph should have been the target here. And if this works out, it lets the designers and developers work on different things like updating class design in the long term, make actual content designed around flying or player housing, and basically anything that doesn't have a set shelf life of 2 years. Take some risks and make features that are designed to last. Okay, this is a really vague bullet point, but just go ahead and fill the blank. There's an immediate challenge that's laid before us with this design approach. How do we design professions to be an expansion feature when 1, not all professions are made equal, and 2, there's an unknown quantity of players who just don't care for professions regardless of the cool? Meanwhile, herbalism might be more profitable than engineering no matter what changes are made, so do they both need to be equally epic or profitable, or can we double down on their profession identity? At the same time, we don't want players to feel like they're forced to pick up a profession, as if not having one means they're demonstrably less powerful. But there should also be something fulfilling and worthwhile for any player to at least consider it. Notice though, I didn't necessarily mean high-performance players. Shadowlands is doing a reasonably decent job of separating high-end gear progression from the stuff that's done for fun, like Anima, the Covenant Sanctum, and its side activities. To that end, an expansion with an emphasis on professions should follow the same formula. Consider this a mandate, where players who just want to dive into dungeons, raids, and PvP, and get to the highest levels of the game, they can do just that, and will be totally fine 100%. They can pretty much ignore expansion features from now on, including what I'm trying to propose here. Now, this feels almost counterproductive though, doesn't it? Because many fans claim that the majority of players run high-end content, and so, without that expansion feature grindy thing, they're gonna have nothing left to do or work for, and then they quit. But in a game like WoW, that's separated by seasons, isn't that the kind of goal to hit too? To consider your character complete, at least until the next season? We've witnessed the frustration from players over Titan Forging and the so-called endless grind to hit that best-in-slot goal. In Legion and Battle for Azeroth, that's proven to be a statistical challenge to meet before the next season. It risks demotivating players to go on, knowing that their goals can't be reached, not because of their skill, but because of probability. At the very least, it gets them bitching on Twitter, right? Which can really sour the mood. Shadowlands hopes to go in the direction of hitting that best-in-slot threshold, and otherwise let players enjoy having a bit more time to mess with alts, or play the more casual parts of content, or even take a short break from the game. Shifting to professions hopes to do the same thing, while giving a long-tail goal for those who are participating, because for them, their sense of urgency doesn't have that time limit. At least I'm making that assertion, okay? Now we're going to get into examples, beware, examples of how we can give more oomph to professions. And whether you agree with me or not, I think you'll come away from these examples thinking, wait, that's it? That doesn't seem like much, right? But that's kind of the point. So let's begin with gathering professions, as in herbs and ores and skins and fishes, the foundation of most of the other professions. If we're trying to add a bit more fantasy into this, we've got to stand in the shoes of these gatherers and ask ourselves, well, what sort of epic experience can we give them? Okay, epic might be a little bit much, but at the moment, it's just, farm, especially with your multi-boxer setup. I think we can add a little bit more to this. So let's start with rare materials that only appear at certain times of the day, or week, or even month. How about ore or herbs that appear in like a specific place out in the world? How about materials that can expire once they're picked, unless they're used in a crafting recipe? Or materials that can only be mined or skinned from the corpse of the final boss in that one dungeon, or a raid in Mythic difficulty. Let's put aside multi-boxers and think about this for a second. This already gives a new sense of depth to gatherers who can get most materials just fine. But what about the best materials, the rarest materials for that one weapon, that one transmog or mount that could take weeks to gather? That's the kind of design that I'm looking for. In that case, you, player, are going to need the experience, the opportunity, and maybe the team that's going to get you there. And maybe you better use or sell that item quickly. That's the kind of experience that I want professions to sell to players, so let's keep going. Armor crafting professions come next, and here's where you start to see the emphasis that I'm trying to make here, that not all professions are made equal, but we're making what they are more vibrant. And capturing the fantasy of making gear to beat up bad guys, there are two kinds of crafting. One is to make equipment that's at least effective at the sacrifice of looks. The other is to use more materials to craft something that is expected of your caliber. That is the stuff that just looks nice. With that in mind, I have in my head that players can craft armor and weapon prototypes that are bound to that character, and maybe even prevent transmog from working on them too, but it's gear that works as well as anyone else's and can be upgraded to heroic raid quality. But there's also going to be like the good stuff, the really expensive, high quality, mythic level pieces that'll probably take so much out of you that maybe you can only make like a few of these in a given season to sell for a very, very high price, or of course, to keep for yourself. Engineers aren't well known for the profitability or even the feasibility of their gadgets outside of PvP. And even then. Anyway, engineers can be juiced up to provide some crazy world buffs for themselves and for others, and sometimes it might suck, but hear me out. Imagine if some of the features of Mechagon were applied to an entire expansion continent. So think of it like this, like maybe in the expansion's hub, wherever that is, there's a sort of engineers academy. It's only for engineers where they can collaborate. Similar to Deliverance Point, engineers throw in spare parts and other items that only they find out in the world to activate a game-wide buff. Maybe a giant laser rains terror on their enemies and friends sometimes too. Or how about changing the weather to unlock rares and treasures and quests that only appear in certain conditions? That could be fun. How about a radar for gatherers so they can get materials that they otherwise can't even see? Which is consumable, of course, because that radar is going to blow up at some point, right? And in certain places dotted around the world, a collaboration station, you like that? Where engineers can get together, throw in spare parts, and then build a weapon station, just like in Mechagon, and it can help them knock out outdoor content. It would be cool if they can make their own like little pop-up town or pop-up base for them and for others too. Seriously, I can make up so much more random craziness for engineers, but I really should move on. To Inscription, of course. You probably know where I'm going with this, right? Because you're right, glyphs. Tons and tons and tons of glyphs, and a UI to manage these glyphs, pretty please. An endless stream of imagination is possible with glyphs, from the Return of Blood Knights to Void Elf Holy Priests that make sense, to Lightforged Shadow Priests that make sense. The WoW art team can go through all the notes that are pinned on their cork boards or whatever boards that they use and just get stupid with the sorts of ability modifications that they can do for classes. And on top of that, what if a scribe could rewrite the dungeon on your mythic keystone? So like maybe choosing the exact dungeon has a 1-week cooldown, or choosing a random one like re-rolling it has a 4-hour cooldown. I'm going to stop the examples here because frankly I ran out of imagination for the other professions, but I don't want to lose you either. I just hope though that I'm making the points clear. In general, professions can potentially deliver on top level gear, but the trade-off is that the work to make them will require the same dedication of someone running high level dungeons or PvP or raids. But those who dedicate themselves towards professions only will be rewarded with world buffs and a certain self-sustainability, notably for armor crafters. Each profession will deliver something unique that makes professions feel special and can affect those around them too. And again, it's not meant to feel like a requirement to be a powerful character. That blacksmith who can make that mythic level sword is probably going to sell it to the highest paying guild, but that's probably the only one that they're going to make given the rarity of the materials. That's going to be critical to make professions like blacksmithing feel more prestigious and less routine. This is a really dangerous assertion to make, but I think that when it comes to performance-based endgame, as in raids and PvP and dungeons, players would be better off with a very simplified progression system, without a significant overlap with other content, at least not at the level that Legion and Battle for Azeroth did. Blizzard has said numerous times that they want players jumping in with fewer barriers so that they can play with their friends. Legion and BFA, though, made mistakes in the form of legendaries and essences, respectively, that made Blizzard eat their words. And we'll see if in Shadowlands players will discriminate against each other, not because of their luck or their dedication to the game, but their choices. But I firmly believe that with Shadowlands, we're actually leaning a little bit away from the notion of expansion features. Hopefully in the future, we'll divorce ourselves from that philosophy entirely, and work on the features that have been neglected for quite some time. Like this. It's possible. So share your thoughts, like the video, and subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft. We'll see you later. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.